why LSU's defensive line will lead the Tigers to an SEC West crown, and even beyond that, we're talking SEC championship, maybe potentially college football playoff national champion once again for the LSU football Tigers. I really like LSU's defensive line going into the 2021 season, and I honestly believe that this could be the direct catalyst of why they would definitely do it. A lot of people, when they talk about their defense, will definitely go to their secondary, and rightfully so, because it's a very experienced secondary. You arguably have the best cornerback tandem. Now, I think they actually do have the best cornerback tandem in all of college football with Derek Stingley Jr., and then, of course, with Elias or Eli Ricks. And then you have to add in the fact that they have a lot of experience with guys like Todd Harris Jr. Obviously, you have Maurice Hampton back there. I mean, they have tons and tons of experience from the safety positions, from the slot corner position, and then, of course, from the outside corner positions with Derek Stingley Jr. and Eli Ricks. But no one really talks about their defensive line. I mean, for some reason, I don't understand. Maybe they're young, maybe they just weren't that much impactful, or maybe they just don't have enough star credentials for a lot of people to kind of mention their defensive line. But their defensive line is absolutely loaded with 4- and 5-star talent. And again, when we talk about the defensive line, it's all about the trenches, the trenches, the trenches, the trenches. So when we look at the defensive line, obviously the biggest names will be Ali Gay, who is a player that doesn't really have the best stats in the world, but when we're talking about LSU edge rushers, we all know they are extremely talented, and they probably have the best upside out of any player on that defensive line. Obviously, again, Ali Gay is a guy that's around 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", around 240 pounds, a long kind of lengthy arm guy type of guy, and a guy that holds first round type of credentials to his name if he can live up to his potential. Then you have a guy like Andre Anthony, who has a lot of experience, and a guy that is projected of becoming that starter. BJ Ojolari, who was more, in my opinion, I honestly believe he's the best defensive lineman there. And again, he was a true freshman last year, but reminds me a lot of his older brother, Azeez Ojolari. Very explosive off the line of scrimmage, raw, but a guy that has a crap ton of upside, and he's still extremely young as an edge rusher and has a lot to learn from. The defensive line, obviously, you have the experience with Glenn Logan and Neil Farrell Neil Farrell Jr. obviously will help. Remember, those two guys played a huge part of why they won a national title. Again, those are more rotational pieces, but still, they had a pretty big contribution to that national championship squad, and those players will be returning back for the 2021 season. A lot of people should definitely keep an eye on one player, and I love this player. That's Jaquelin Roy. Jaquelin Roy was more of a rotational piece for LSU's defensive line in 2020, and he's a guy that definitely came on late in the season. Definitely, probably more notably, the Florida game. The Florida game was by far his best game, in my opinion. He was a guy that showed a lot of disruption, he showed a lot of upside, and he showed exactly why he was considered to be a 5-star according to 24/7 Sports. Going into the 2021 season, I watched the spring game, and he was incredible. I mean, I couldn't even put it into words. He was incredible. He was all over the field. He was extremely disruptive, not only in the run game, but in the passing game as well. And he showed a ton of upside of not just being the best LSU defensive lineman. He showed a lot of potential of him being the best LSU defensive player. Now, I'm not saying he's Michael Brockers or he's Glenn Dorsey or he's Booger McFarland or Spears, but he's a guy that could potentially be the best defensive player there, just because of just how much improvement we saw from him during the spring, compared to what we saw from the fall to the spring game. We got to admit, I mean, I have to admit, I'm an Alabama fan, but we got to admit, this dude is scary. He has scary upside, and I do believe that this guy could be the big difference of why LSU's defensive line could be one of the best in the country. You also have to add in some other factors like Jacobian Gilroy, who's a guy, a player that definitely a lot of fans look up to, and again, a lot of fans expect him to definitely hold a pretty big contribution. Mason Smith, a 5-star kid from Louisiana as well, is going to be a true freshman. He's a guy that's probably going to be playing a lot more as a rotational piece, but a guy that probably will be playing as that nose, probably That big nose, fill like the gap, very, very strong, physical, but a guy that can also play as a 3 technique as well. RJ Carter is a guy I do believe he's going to be their defensive line coach as well. You're talking about an NFL veteran, 13 years in the league. It'll be very interesting to see what he can do with this defensive line, how much better he can make it. Obviously, all the talent in the world is there. But obviously with Andre Carter and Durante Jones there, again, it's going to be pretty interesting to see what he does there. All that talent, again, all those names I just named, and I think the common factor, maybe besides maybe Mason Smith, is that there's a lot of experience there. And an LSU team that is definitely going to be underestimated by a lot of the college football world, a lot of the college football fans and media. We could see an LSU defensive line emerge and be the biggest reason why they'll do it. Now, again, people will definitely note to their secondary, but again, it starts from the trenches. It starts in the trenches, I mean. And with the talent and with the combination of talent and experience there, again, this LSU team could emerge to be one of the best in the country and potentially win in the SEC West crown and steal it from Bama because of the defensive line.